I'm Scott Miller, and this is my life living in León, Nicaragua. I do a lot of videos helping people and discussing about doing business or investing in or moving to Nicaragua and how you may want to move your money into the country and different things. And something that we say more and more often, as I've done this over the years, we've started to realize a very fundamental truth about how people perceive easy and hard and opportunistic places and ways in which to invest. And there's a really important viewpoint that I think we need to discuss here that may change how you look and think about investing when you're moving to Nicaragua and a lot of other tropical paradise kind of places. So we're going to get to that right after the bump. I was just missing the bump today and decided we were going to bring it back. I am doing a number of short videos pretty quickly because I'm going to be going to Laguna de Apoyo. In fact, by the time you're watching this video, I should be on the bus heading back home and hopefully gonna have a lot of cool stuff to edit. And in the next week-ish, you'll be seeing videos coming out from our trip to Laguna de Apoyo. I might even get some done early, but we will see. I'm going to be backlogging hopefully quite a bit. If everything goes well, I will be bringing lots of equipment with me. I do have the girls with me. I do have Josie Mar that we're going to visit, and we're going to be trying out Indian food from the new place in Masaya, which I'm also very excited about, as we have not been able to find Indian food in Nicaragua for the last 4.5 years, and I don't actually remember any before that, but we didn't have to look for it in the past. We're really excited about that. So, real quickly, some housekeeping. Anything you might need to know about the show, contacting me, social media, how to sponsor the show, or anything, check out the show notes. It's all right in there. It's not that overload of information. We got a lot of other channels. They're not so busy, but go check them out. Help support us just by subscribing, go watching other videos, anything at all helps. Send in video questions, send me an email, whatever you need. You can take care of all those things down there. And of course, get in the comments, say hello, ask questions there, and so forth. We love getting feedback from you guys and being able to answer that. On today's show, we're going to talk about the general viewpoint of investing here in Nicaragua. And the thing that I want to point out is when coming to a lot of places like Nicaragua, Nicaragua is an example, but this would also be true in Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Ecuador, Colombia, any number of tropical paradise and other places as well, but places that are lower income and very popular as tourist destinations, often places with beaches, places with beautiful sunsets, and just you want to live there, places that you just really, really are passionate about. And what people tend to get in their minds, and it's taken me a long time to realize that this is what's happening, is they come to, we're going to use Nicaragua as the example, but again, it applies to all these kinds of places. And you can imagine the same thing in Thailand and Laos and, Vietnam and just all kinds of really wonderful places that you visit and you fall in love with. And when you do this, and I thought it was going to be in more shade. It's late afternoon. I'm just putting up with the sun. So if it looks good, great. And if it doesn't, I'm sorry. When you come to these places, one of the things that hits you, if you're coming from like Europe or North America, is how much lower everything costs. And this triggers two things. One, vacation brain. You're on vacation. You're in this tropical paradise. You love it. And you look around and you see that there isn't a lot of development in most cases. And sometimes there's a bit more and sometimes there's a bit less. Here in Nicaragua, it's extreme how little there is. And when you come to a place like this, it's easy to look around and say, wow, there's so much missed opportunity that if someone was to build a hotel, restaurant, bar, whatever, you always have this, wherever you go on vacation, you're going to have this feeling no matter how untrue it is. But if you're in a place like Barcelona, it's so overdeveloped that you're mostly going to be able to talk yourself out of believing that. But you come to a place like Nicaragua, and there's so little that it feels like there's no way you couldn't need to have a lot more. And the fact that everything costs so little makes you think, it would be so easy to start up a business and do something here. And so in our minds, we start to think of places like Nicaragua as being the easy mode for investing. This is where, yes, you understand, maybe the big international companies are not going to come. Your Fortune 100 aren't going to be coming to Nicaragua and looking to set up shop here for reasons that big businesses have. But for you as a regular investor, this seems like a very simple place to dip your toes into the whole concept of being an entrepreneur and try things out and become a business person. So much so that many people who have never considered having a business before immediately mentally jump into a space where they're like, well, of course I want to do a business where it's easy. And again, they're not expecting to get rich. They're expecting to make good money off of their investment. And this feels so natural, but like most things, when we approach it emotionally, our emotions are generally backwards. The world does not operate the way we feel, and the nature of how our emotions work causes our most of the environment around us to flip from what our emotions are. It's just the way that our brains work. And so anytime you have an emotional drive, whether it's for safety or investing or risk management or anything of the sort, chances are your emotions are going to be backwards, if not at least going to lead you astray. So it's very important that, especially in things like business and investing, that you don't let emotions drive you. You have to use math and logic and knowledge and facts. It's just how things are. And so you get this feeling that it's easy mode because it's cost so little, and it is true. If your goal is simply to learn how to set up a business, you want to try some really simple little things just for the sake of learning, then the lower cost of Nicaragua is quite easy, because you could do something like start up a restaurant for very little money and have a restaurant of your own. So let's give an example. When I was young, I needed to start a business I did it for normal reasons because I wanted to sell products, but one of the advantages that I got from having my own business was I had the opportunity to build a resume. When I needed something new on my resume, my company would go out and do it, and naturally I would get it on my resume. When I was younger, we would say things like, oh, there's this new technology out and no one is using it in the business place, so nobody has experience on it. So we would go out, get that technology for our business and implement it. It wouldn't be that expensive to implement, but larger companies would be looking for people with experience to build it at their company. And by coming in and not just saying, oh, I have some experience, soup to nuts. I was the one who, chose the product. I'm the one who deployed the product. I'm the one who maintains the product. I knew everything about it. I had just way more experience than other people because I was building it myself. And so if you're building a resume either just to learn things, and that was super useful, it was basically a real in the trenches educational environment, classroom, or if you were looking to build a resume, both of those things it worked really well for. But on its own, it didn't really make us any money. It made our money through this ancillary building our resumes so that other places would hire us. And in some cases, they would hire me directly. In some cases, they would hire the company. In both cases, the company coming up with ways to come up with its own experience. And if you do these things on your own, for example, these were technology things. I would go set up a new server, a new technology. If I just did that at home in a lab, companies would look at it as a 1%, 2% experience. Well, you've looked at it, but it's not the same as doing it for real. But if we would do it in our own business, even though the setup is essentially identical, nothing is really different, they looked at it as complete experience, the same as if you had done it as a job anywhere, because you did, and there really is no difference, and they can't differentiate. So suddenly, the exact same amount of time and effort became super valuable instead of marginally worthless. And then you had better ways to talk about it throughout your career. It was really good. So the same thing with a restaurateur. If you have no opportunity to go work in a restaurant, maybe as a chef or as a restaurant designer or whatever, if you have enough money to come to Nicaragua and start up your own restaurant, you can start a restaurant and gain that experience. Put it on a resume. Whether it is your personal experience and you simply want to know how to be a chef in a kitchen, you can give yourself that experience under real world pressure at minimum cost. Or if you want to put on your resume experienced restaurateur, being able to design and open a restaurant with menu and seating and all these different things, you can take photographs, you can do a lot to build a portfolio for minimal cost. And that is where things like Nicaragua can be really useful and very approachable. But that is not what you do for investing. That is investing in yourself, for sure, and it does have value. And so Nicaragua could be that place, and that feeling is what supports, provides a foundation for this misinformation that our brains create, that then investing would be easy. Because in this case, whether it was my company doing technology that we didn't need just to have that experience, or you're starting a restaurant just to have that experience, we're talking about losing money here. Now, in both cases, they may eventually make money through the ancillary changes and resume building and experience that gives us. But the actual business itself, whether it's deploying those servers in my business, that simply costs us time and money. Whether it's starting up this restaurant in Nicaragua, that's probably going to cost you time and money. You may mitigate some of it by having customers and charging them, but the chances that you'll actually be profitable, extremely low. But could you then turn around, go to Lima, Madrid, Berlin, and use that experience as a foundation for getting in as a sous chef at a really good restaurant that is going to pay you and you're going to make good money from it? Yeah, very possibly. But it's not the investment in Nicaragua that's doing that, it's the experience. That's very important. But if you were to do the same thing, say in the United States, and just start up a small restaurant to get that experience, it could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. But here in Nicaragua, it might only cost $10,000. And so if that's the thing you're trying to get, yes, that might make sense. And I know people who have done that. So that is reasonable. That is smart. But you have to know exactly what you're doing and where the money is going. That then turns into people thinking, whether they're really studying that or it just kind of is in the back of their minds, they think, well, if it's so little cost to start up a business, if it's so little risk to start up a business, on one side, we're talking about the risk of losing the money that you are putting into it, right? In the United States, if you need $200,000 to open a minimal restaurant, you've got $200,000 on the line. That's big risk. If you need $10,000 to open up a minimal restaurant in Nicaragua, that's only $10,000 on the line. That's minimal risk in comparison anyway. So they have this feeling, oh, the risk level is low. I don't need to really worry about things, but that's a spending money risk, not an investing risk. In an investing way, we're worried about the rate of return. And if we don't get a high enough rate of return, it's a loss, right? Whether it's a small rate of return that doesn't match market, or worse, it doesn't match inflation, that's where our money is eroding. If we beat that number, our money is growing, maybe very small, maybe quite a bit, depending, right? But our risk is that we don't manage to hit that investment number on an ongoing basis where we're getting a good rate of return. So risk in an investment perspective is completely different than risk in a resume building perspective. So when we get this feeling, it's low risk because it's not that much money. And that is true. From a how much are we getting in, it might be a smaller amount of money. But what are the chances we're going to get a profitable investment out is also far lower. So this is where, in reality, Nicaragua is investing on expert level. This is one of the hardest countries to successfully invest in. That doesn't mean that you can't, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't, but it means that you need to approach it with a mindset of everything is going to be roughly as hard as it can reasonably get. It's not completely true. There are some things that aren't that bad, but overall, it leans much more towards a very hard environment than a very easy one. It is true. There's a lot fewer regulations than you would get in, say, Europe, for example. I would generally consider Europe to be a medium environment. It's easy to do business there, but it's really hard to meet all of the requirements, especially if you're not from there, and they're not super business friendly overall. And when you do talk to people who are in business there and are successful at all, they all repeat the same thing. As someone who's been in business for a long time, every single European investor that I know all say that all of their money is made through corruption. None of it is made through actually doing a good job, which in the United States, you meet lots of people who are in the same boat, but you also meet lots of people who are actually trying to do a good job and find ways to make money anyway. But in Europe, I never run into those people. Every single person is like, yeah, the government makes us do all these things that are anti-business, that are anti-ethics, that are just handing money to somebody's brother, and there's no option around it. Everything is designed to keep professionals from acting professional, and that's a super depressing environment. And once that's the rule, nobody really cares anymore, and then it all just goes downhill. And that's why I would never set up shop doing business in Europe. I can sell things to Europe, but I would never use it as a base for operations, just like I wouldn't in Canada, same kind of thing. So it's different environments. Here in Nicaragua, I would much prefer to do business here. Even if it's a little bit harder and the market is smaller, it doesn't have those weird business corruption problems that you get in Europe. And if you've never done business, that may be hard to understand what we're talking about. But if you ever actually work in business and then go to Europe and realize you have to bid on everything and you have all these rules where you're not allowed to pay professionals for advice and you have to be sold things through a salesman who's lying to you, and you have to do all these things that are unethical for your business and for your customers, but you're required by law to do it. Like the government goes so far out of its way to make sure you can't do a good job and not take care of your customers and not be ethical. It's super ultra weird. And of course, it's the law, so you get to be like, I don't have to be ethical. The law says I can't be, but still, it's not a great situation. I digress. But here in Nicaragua, things are hard. The market is tiny. People have very little money. The same things that make it very cheap to start up a business also make it nearly impossible to make any profits. So sure, you have that restaurant in the United States that costs $200,000 to get the doors open, but there's a reasonable chance you're going to be able to bring in good return on your investment. Maybe $10,000 or $20,000 per year could be coming back based on the money you put in. Here in Nicaragua, you put that $10,000 in. If you're hoping that you're going to be able to pull $1,000 out of that, you're in for a surprise. That's going to be very unlikely. Most likely, you're going to pull nothing out of it. Possibly, you're going to have to keep putting more money in because it's going to be running at a loss. And so the ratios of what you're able to return on a regular basis are very different. In some extreme cases, you can get them pretty close to each other. But overall, the United States and other markets like it are going to return for the same amount of money in a ratio that is better. So here in Nicaragua, you might have to open 20 restaurants to equal the amount of investment. But 20 restaurants in Nicaragua is not going to likely be able to return as much as one restaurant in the United States if the investment amounts are equal. It's kind of a contrived scenario, but that's how the math works. And in the U.S., running one restaurant is much easier than running 20 in Nicaragua, simply because 20 is a lot to keep track of. So you have to do different things to make your money work in the same way. So it's easy to have small investments, but to have them create a good rate of return is extremely difficult compared to other environments, at least. Doable, but very, very hard. And that's why Nicaragua is investing on expert level. So if you're looking at getting into the market and you're saying, oh, well, the threshold for getting in is low, the barrier of entry is low, that is correct, but the barrier to success is very, very high. So in one case, the barrier to entry is quite high, but the barrier to success is relatively low. And the other, the barrier to entry is low and the barrier to success is high. So one encourages you to get in and then lose your money. The other encourages you not to get in, but if you do, you're still struggling, but your chances of making a lot of money is much higher. And so when you approach Nicaragua, it's not that you shouldn't invest, it's not that you shouldn't want to invest, it's not that you should be dissuaded from the concept, but don't come to it with a mindset of this is going to be easier, that's why I didn't do it in other places. No, it should be, I'm passionate about this, I love this country, I want to be here, I want to be involved, I want to help, and therefore I'm willing to put in more effort and take on more risk and do more research and just be harder because I'm going to try to do it even though it's an uphill battle. You really have to have that. And when you have that mindset and you're going into things with it, you're much more likely to be better prepared. You're much more likely to not panic and collapse your business. You're much more likely to see things as they really are, to be prepared for things when they come. And just knowing that, because so many people come in and think that they just invest and money will just start flowing. And even in the US, that won't happen. And the US is so much easier. And you're still not going to have that happen. Doing that here, absolutely not going to happen. You have to make the magic happen, and you have to put in more research, more time, more effort, and even so, expect lower returns. If you go to the United States and put in the same amount of effort that you do here, chances are 8 out of 10 times you will get better returns in the US. But this gives you the lifestyle you want. This gives you an environment where you're making a difference. This gives you a place with more flexibility. There's a lot of reasons why you might want to be investing in Nicaragua, whether it's enough to get residency because you're a big investor, or just a little bit because you want to play around with having your own business, or you want to learn and see if you should put in more money. In all these cases, please come to Nicaragua and invest. Just do so realistically. Do so with good expectations and an understanding of why you're doing it. You're not doing it because it's easy. You're not doing it because you think you're going to be magically making more money than in the US. You're not doing it because other people haven't thought of this. You're not doing it because it's underdeveloped, because it's not. It's actually developed a bit too much for the market that it currently has. The market is growing. There is opportunity, but it's a slow growth and the needs are basically met currently. So come in and say, I'm doing this because whatever reason. Find that reason. Make sure you know what your goals are. Don't just say, well, I want to have a business. That's generally not a goal. It can be, but it's very rarely a goal. And if your goal is just to make money, then that probably doesn't make sense. If your goal is to learn business, it might make sense, but only if that resulting business is in Nicaragua. So step back, make sure you know exactly what your goals are. Take some time to write them down. Really reflect on them and ask yourself, is that truly a goal, or is that just on the path to what my goal is? And there are times that having a primary goal and a secondary goal are okay. For example, I want to retire well. That's a good goal. Like that, people understand. I want to have enough money that I don't worry in my retirement years. Excellent. And then people may say, so I want to own a business that will do well. Well, that's good. That is one way to get to that, but there are other paths with the same money to get to that comfortable retirement. And so you have to say, is part of your goal to own a business, or is owning a business the best way to meet that goal? And if not, maybe that isn't what you should do. Maybe you should do something else with your money. Put it into an index fund that's much more likely to, without effort from you, without risk as much for you, get you to that goal. You need to think about those things. That's why we have to think about what our real goal is and then determine what things will get us to that goal. And if that goal is met by investing in Nicaragua, then absolutely you should do that. And for people like me, part of the goal is helping the local economy, finding jobs for people, having businesses that provide services that I want to use here in the area. There's a lot of reasons why you may want to be in a business here, but most of us who are successful, the majority for sure, have already been in business in other environments, have that experience, and are leveraging, in many cases, decades of experience in business and entrepreneurship in other places, and bringing that and then trying to use all that experience to overcome the natural additional difficulties of doing business in Nicaragua. And just to be clear, we had some videos recently where we talk about how doing business for locals is far easier in Nicaragua than it is for foreigners, which is totally true. But it's important to be clear that even a local in Nicaragua faces a much harder battle to make a really profitable business compared to someone in the United States trying to do the same thing or similar thing. Locals in America versus locals in Nicaragua, the Americans have an advantage. And Nicaraguans will tell you this straight up, like, obviously they do. But Americans often feel like Nicaraguans somehow have this big advantage, but haven't taken advantage of it. And that's a thing that you should step back and say, this is a country with a very low average income. If there was an opportunity for everyone to go out and invest and have businesses and be wildly successful, so much easier and more than in the United States or Canada or Europe, clearly they would have, and they'd be really, really rich. So that's not happening. There are a ton of people who have businesses that make basically no money. Most businesses in Nicaragua aren't profitable on their own as a business. They're just frameworks for the owners to be able to work for themselves rather than for someone else, like the local pulperia out of someone's living room kind of thing, or someone doing chair and sofa repair out of their living room kind of thing. There's a lot of this, people selling drinks out of their living room. You see a trend here. They're not investing into that business and getting an investment return. They're simply putting in a tiny bit of money, creating a business and paying themselves a super low salary, but they have a legal framework for working for themselves. And that creates a different environment than many people picture. So when we say that everybody is in business here, yes, that's true, but not in the way that you would picture like Americans having businesses and having their own little manufacturing facility with a few employees. No, most Nicaraguan businesses don't have any employees and are not pulling profits at the end of the year. Anyway, ways to think about what it is you want and what it is that Nicaragua is going to offer you. You just need to have the right mindset and you'll be successful most of the time. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ScottAlanMiller. And as always, share on social media, tell someone about the show, and I will see all of you tomorrow.